What's up, guys? Rishi here. Welcome to the podcast. Today, our guest is Yannick Armoogum. He is a backend developer at Proximity Mauritius. In this podcast, we are going to cover the following topics: the technologies being used at Proximity and in Mauritius in general, the limitation of MVC5, ASP.NET MVC5. We are also going to look at GDPR, and we are going to finally look at some design patterns and the onion architecture. So let's get started. I know you already told me, but just for the audience, which technologies do you use at work and why do you use those technologies?
First of all, we are doing mostly .NET development at Proximity. So obviously we are using ASP.NET MVC5 entity framework. We also use dependency injection, Vue.js for frontend, some TypeScript also, Bug, Sass. Yeah, that's kind of.
Cool. So you're also using TypeScript. So you are having a lot of object-oriented languages. You have C# and TypeScript, which are both both made by the same person as well. Yes.
We try to apply the solid principles when we are working, having like more blocks of code that can be reused, a lot of inversion of control also, and concise object. I don't know if you get what I'm.
Yes. Actually, I think it's called also the singleton design pattern, where you have a single value everywhere in your application, then you just reference back to it. And then that's very common with object-oriented approach. So that's very good. You are using Vue.js, which is also very good. We recently in another podcast compared it with its rivals, and we found that right now it's quite the ideal choice for developers who want to get into front-end development, because it is really simple. At the same time, it is very up to date with all the recent technologies. Async web, yes, the asynchronous web, which is very up to date to that. This is my first question. Now, his second question is regard to MVC5. With regard to MVC5, you've been using .NET technologies at Proximity. Do you find any limitation with ASP.NET MVC5?
When you compare MVC5 to some language, not language, but some frameworks, like let's say React, I'd say that as MVC5 is mostly .NET, it's way more rigid. Like everything you have to declare, and a variable for everything you have to declare, like an object and interface. It's like sometimes you're asking for the system for a banana, and you end up getting a gorilla with the entire jungle holding a banana. We had that joke last time. Yeah, it's exactly. It's mostly the problem with .NET in general. Like you have sometimes you can achieve something much more easier and straight, and in a much more straightforward way if you do it directly via Vue.js, React, or via JavaScript.
I agree, especially with your web services. If you are using web services, it's way easier to use something like React or even Vue. But with MVC, you have to go through creating an app, creating your classes, going through entity framework if you're having a database.
But I think it depends also on the project, because some projects require a lot of strong processing power, and some they require a strong server side. I think for mostly where web development is going right now, I think that the server side development, I mean backend, typical backend, like conventional with .NET PHP, you can put PHP also on that conventional backend, is going to eventually become less and less popular with React and Vue.js getting such a. It's really impressive what they are doing right now. Everything that you're currently doing in the back, you can do like 75% on React, 75% of the work done on back you can do on Vue.js.
Yes, JS technologies are really taking over. As you see, even Chrome is written in JavaScript with V8 engine. So it's really evolving for us. We have Visual Studio Code, which is also written in JavaScript.
Yeah.
Compared to Visual Studio itself, which is written, I think, in C#. You have SQL Management Studio, which is written in C#. So these are technologies from traditional end, but as we are talking about, technologies which are from the open source, which are from JavaScript, are already taking over now.
And in terms of performance, I'd say that JavaScript technologies, the new technologies, you can see the new era, are much more lightweight. So when you say Visual Studio Code was made with JavaScript, you realize how much faster it is than actually. Even though you can say that the classic Visual Studio has much more functionality, but it's really impressive what they were able to do with this editor.
Compared to Visual Studio, which I think would take half a minute to open on my computer, Visual Studio Code might be taking just kind of 5 seconds.
Yeah.
On my end, I also found some limitation on MVC5. First of all, MVC5, especially the Razor view, is not very easy to integrate with new technologies such as WebGL for me because of the lack of tutorials that it have online. There's no tutorials on how to do so.
Yeah. ISP does not have that strong community
absolutely.
like you have with Node.
With Node, exactly.
Yeah. ISP, not really. You can only find some tutorials on YouTube, but yeah, it's in general with .NET it's like that, I think.
Yes, because it was not open source in the beginning. Yeah. That's why they didn't really invest into the community.
Yeah.
Yes, that's for MVC5. Now, we were talking about GDPR, and you told me how difficult it is being for almost every company to adapt to this new standard. What can you tell us more about it?
First of all, GDPR was as a result of many privacy breaches which happened in Europe. They decided to pass a law which had many of those companies has to restructure the way they store their data. We had to completely refactor the way we were storing data and a website, but I will not cite the name. But yeah, it was a huge talk because the feature was already developed, already went through quality assurance and went live, but with GDPR, we had to almost redevelop everything. Sure, that was a pain because we had I think that for GDPR, if the flow of who is accountable for which data and the exact flow of who will store that data, when can we store that data, has the user given his consent, if all of that is not written on paper, clear, this will be an extreme pain to develop because there will be a lot of confusion. GDPR is very, very, very flu.
Because I think most hosting providers are not yet catered for GDPR. They are not really having the infrastructure to tell their users that they will be keeping this data for only that much time or something like that. Because I think that would also affect their business as a whole.
Yeah, because when you're developing GDPR, when you're developing for like a feature, where the user is giving away his information, is very, very sensitive now, because you always have to be in the user's mind to ask yourself, has he given that consent? If not all of this has already written down, already specified before in the technical requirements, it will be extremely difficult, because you will have to assume, has he given his consent? And like, it's not your job. The flow is supposed to be like written clear, and you just have to follow the flow. You understand?
I think that the privacy update might just take into the account of that, a new policy whereby users are just signing that policy via a checkbox, something like that.
Yeah, the opt-in checkbox. You mean the opt-in checkbox?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, but I think no one is really ready for that, and no one was prepared, actually. It's not we are not ready. No one was preparing for that, and you can see that some companies size that opportunity. Like, I don't know if you saw the billboard, but there was a company which was offering GDPR services. What they mean that they completely refactor the way you're storing data, they do the development for you, okay? Because they take responsibility for you being GDPR compliant.
Was that in Mauritius? No, it was not.
Yeah. I saw the billboard. I was driving. I was on my way back home, and I saw a huge billboard. GDPR. I don't remember the name of the company exactly, but I do a research on Google and I'll let you know. Because there are some company offering services for you to be GDPR compliant. So this is how much trouble some companies are. They have to hire other companies to do that for them. You understand?
Yes. Now moving to the next question. So I know at Proximity and even every other major company, users design patterns, and you told me that you were familiar with the onion architecture. Can you tell me a bit about what the onion architecture is?
Mostly, we don't usually apply the exact same onion architecture, because the architecture really depends on the project. But it's like a benchmark for me, it's like a benchmark of the architecture to be achieved. Like, I should always strive to achieve an architecture like that. Even if I'm not an architect, but if I'm doing a personal project, I will like my structure to be like that. So to begin, the onion architecture is like basically separating the core and the UI. Okay. And having a layer between the core and the UI, which and there's a transfer of data between these two separate layers. You understand? And this transfers data is done via dependency injection. The whole point behind that is that you have a core in the UI, and ultimately, if you want to change the UI, it just be a plugin to the core. So thanks to dependency injection, everything is loosely coupled. Okay. So tomorrow, I did the core for a project named X. Okay. For a brand, a group, okay, a company group, let's say IBL. And I did the core development, and there's all those some branches of IBL which want a website. But automatically, they share the same features. Let's see. All these 5 websites, we share the 4 features, but just with some different front-end design, UX design. You will just add 5 web projects, and you have only one core, with the core being reused across all these 5 web projects. You can see UI. It's a whole solution on one computer with one core and 5 different web projects. But there's some limitation, because you can say that to be able to like standardize your code to be able to fit for 5 different web projects, because 5 different other websites will not necessarily have the same feature. So it's very tricky to be able to develop that code to be reused across many websites, but true. And with that, you can do it the other way. You see, you can keep your UI and just switch your code if ever you have to migrate. Let's say you are MVC free. You are MVC free. You want to switch to MVC 5, or you want .NET. Let's say MVC 3, MVC 5. You just develop another code, and like again, it will be like a plugin with some adjustment to the HTML, of course, but
it's make it more maintainable also. In that way, you are able to maintain your infrastructure a lot better. You're able to test also. You can test your separate layers better. You're able to find where the bug is.
Especially for large scale project, actually, when you're making a project which will run, let's say, for 10 years, 20 years, and technology will change. Maybe you have to change code, maybe you have to change UI, but you cannot afford to change code and everything goes down. You see? Even when you're developing a feature, you cannot, like, everything cannot be tightly coupled. You must achieve, like, loosely coupled dependencies across each of your modules, because if one module goes down, the other modules should not go down.
I would cover a bit about design patterns also. In my understanding, design patterns are solutions which are used to handle commonly occurring problems in the software design.
Yeah.
For example, there are blueprints that can be taken and customized to solve some design problems in your code. And my experience again with design patterns is the MVC, of course, Model View Controller, which is being used in .NET so often. We are separating the three layers between the view being the HTML and the Razor code, model being all the classes of your application for the database, the controller being all the logic.
Yeah, the whole point of MVC. Yeah,
exactly.
You have also a factory design pattern, like you define interface for creating object and the class implement the interface, like simple basic design pattern.
Yes, that's also common, I think, in MVC with regard to classes. Now, also being an Angular developer as well, I've been using singleton pattern a lot there. There's also the observer pattern, which is a behavioral pattern. I think it's common in most front-end languages right now. It is mostly used for handling real-time data.
You're mostly specialized in Angular?
Not mostly, but I think I spent at least 4 months doing programming in Angular compared to my 2 years on .NET. At CTI, at Region, and also at my own company I've been working on for some time now.
I saw that Angular 8 is out, actually. I saw that, I think it was out yesterday? No, Friday.
Yeah, it's going too fast. It's going too fast. I think every 6 months. Like every 6 months. Yes, yeah.
I saw a comment. There was a guy saying, like, will Angular 8 come out next week?
Too fast.
Yeah.
By the time I learned Angular 5, Angular 6 was already out. And it's going too fast.
No. Yeah, I heard about that. Don't know much about Angular, but I know that you implement the model view controller design pattern also there, right?
It's very structural there. If you have Angular, because Angular is a bit like .NET, it is in fact maintained by Microsoft also. With Angular, if you are using Angular, you might just use Angular itself. You don't need to use another library because it has so many things that are already integrated into it. And again, it's modular, so you can choose what you want and what you don't want, but it's really good for making applications which are robust. I've been using it with Ionic to make mobile applications and also PWAs, progressive web apps. So these are apps which are both mobile and web, and it's quite good in that regard, especially for the support it has with Angular. With Ionic. Ionic has its own marketplace of apps. Right, so I have a last question for you. So what are your most used development websites and resources?
Obviously, as a backend, I'll say Stack Overflow.
I agree.
Stack Overflow is like Jesus. And resources, you said resources, right?
Yes.
Depends. At work, actually use a lot of Visual Studio 2017, Visual Studio Code. I also use Yarn, Gulp. I use Yarn to actually combine our front-end solution, and we use Gulp for our build. Like our build was defined on Gulp.
Yarn is good also with .NET. I've been using Yarn as well. And when I was with Node, I was using NPM, which was also good for compiling your projects. Gulp is almost always important when you are using SAS.
And obviously, the most used resource is Git. I didn't know much about Git before, like at universities. Only when I was at my internship, but I learned about it and learned to use it. And when I was I started with Git Kraken with a UI and all, but when you learn to use the commands on Git Bash, it's really, really cool. You're able to achieve some.
You feel like a hacker with a command prompt.
yeah. And we also it's like satisfaction when your Git is clean. Like we also try to follow the commit conventions and we don't use Git merge. We use Git rebase so that all our commits are just put on top of our older commits. And we also have a good branch structure. We have, let's say you have a hotfix, you have a fix you have to make. You create a hotfix branch that comes from master. If you're developing a feature, you're not fixing something, but you're developing a module. You create a branch from develop, and you name it, and everything that will go live, we just rebase it on a release branch from develop. Let's say release 1.0. That release, which is already rebased on develop, will be rebased to master once the website go live. So when you're able to achieve some clean Git structure and you're looking at your Git UI, you're seeing it as a straight line, it's satisfactory, yeah.
That's nice. I've been using Git also, but I'm mostly being a fully .NET developer. I was using TFS, Team File Explorer or something. We've been using that for some time. It was on the UI side mostly. So it was good, but it's again a paid version. It's not free. So I was able to use that within the organization when I was at Surgeon. But when I was on my own, I also use Git because it's open source. And again with a terminal or command prompt, it's really nice to use as a programmer. You can see exactly what is happening because it tells you exactly in the terminal what processes are being made, how you're sharing your file, how you're merging your branches.
If when you're starting, you're a beginner in Git, using Git Kraken is really, really easy. Everything is already defined on this interface. You just have to if you know how to read and some notions, you'll definitely be able to use it. But there's still some stuff like, let's say, rebase or cherry pick. If you had to cherry pick a commit, like you definitely do it on Git Bash, because Gitkraken has some, I don't know how to say that, but it's kind of strange sometimes. Because you just have, the buttons on Gitkraken are not for, how to say, specific commands. Like you should, for when you're using Git, you should, at an advanced level, you should definitely use Git Bash.
Okay, yeah, I agree.